A relationship tested navigating change in U.S.-Ethiopia ties. The U.S.-Ethiopia relationship has undergone significant transformation since 2017. Once a partnership rooted in shared strategic interests and development cooperation, the relationship has been strained by regional conflicts, domestic political crises, and shifting geopolitical alliances. The Trump administration witnessed increased tension over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and a cooling of diplomatic ties. The Biden administration has faced further challenges, particularly due to the Tigray conflict and Ethiopia's human rights record. These developments have necessitated a recalibration of U.S. policy towards Ethiopia, with a greater emphasis on human rights, democracy, and regional stability as conditions for engagement. The U.S. has long viewed Ethiopia as a key partner in the Horn of Africa, a region grappling with terrorism, poverty, and political instability. Ethiopia's strategic location, large population, and growing economy made it a crucial ally in U.S. efforts to promote regional security and development. However, internal political dynamics within Ethiopia, coupled with the emergence of new regional players, have complicated this partnership. Ethiopia's growing relationship with China, exemplified by its recent entry into BRICS, further underscores the evolving geopolitical landscape that the U.S. must navigate. Despite these challenges, the U.S. remains a significant provider of humanitarian assistance to Ethiopia, particularly in response to the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Tigray and the devastating drought affecting millions. However, the U.S. has become increasingly vocal in its criticism of human rights abuses in Ethiopia, leading to a more conditional approach to aid delivery. This has created friction in the relationship, with Ethiopian officials accusing the U.S. of interfering in its internal affairs. The future of U.S.-Ethiopia relations remains uncertain. The Biden administration faces the complex task of balancing its commitment to human rights and democracy with the need to engage with a strategically important partner. The outcome of this balancing act will have significant implications for the Horn of Africa and the wider region. Diplomatic fault lines, from the Nile to the Tigray. The Trump era marked a turning point in U.S.-Ethiopia relations, particularly with the emergence of the GERD dispute as a major point of contention. Trump's open support for Egypt's position on the dam, including his controversial remark about Egypt potentially blowing up the dam, strained relations with Ethiopia. This period also witnessed a decline in diplomatic engagement, with the U.S. withholding aid to pressure Ethiopia on the GERD negotiations and other issues. The Biden administration entered office inheriting this strained relationship and faced new challenges with the outbreak of the Tigray conflict in late 2020. The conflict, marked by widespread human rights abuses and a humanitarian catastrophe, drew international condemnation, including from the United States. The Biden administration imposed visa restrictions on Ethiopian officials and removed Ethiopia from the African Growth and Opportunity Act, a preferential trade program, due to concerns over human rights violations. Despite these tensions, diplomatic engagement has continued, albeit cautiously. The U.S. has participated in diplomatic efforts to resolve the Tigray conflict and has called for accountability for human rights abuses. However, progress has been slow, and the relationship remains fragile. The recent celebration of 120 years of diplomatic relations between the two countries, marked by cultural events and official statements, highlights the enduring historical ties even as current challenges persist. Moving forward, diplomatic engagement will need to be carefully calibrated. The U.S. must balance its criticism of Ethiopia's human rights record with the need to maintain dialogue and encourage progress on issues of mutual interest, including regional stability and counterterrorism efforts. Ethiopia, for its part, will need to address U.S. concerns over human rights and democratic governance if it wishes to see a full restoration of its previous level of engagement with the United States. Economic realignments, AGOA, BRICS, and the search for new partners. The economic dimension of U.S.-Ethiopia relations has also undergone significant shifts in recent years. Ethiopia, once a major beneficiary of the AGOA trade program, faced economic setbacks following its removal in 2022. The AGOA program had allowed duty-free access to the U.S. market for a wide range of Ethiopian exports, boosting the country's textile industry and creating jobs. The loss of AGOA benefits has led to job losses, factory closures, and reduced export revenues, highlighting the economic costs of strained relations with the United States. Ethiopia's recent entry into BRICS, a grouping of major emerging economies, signals a potential shift in its economic orientation. Membership in BRICS could provide Ethiopia with alternative sources of investment, trade opportunities, and development assistance, potentially reducing its reliance on Western partners. This move reflects a broader trend of African countries seeking to diversify their economic relationships and reduce their dependence on traditional Western donors. However, it is important to note that BRICS membership is unlikely to immediately replace the economic significance of the U.S. for Ethiopia. The U.S. remains a major investor in Ethiopia, and trade between the two countries, while impacted by AGOA removal, continues. Moreover, the U.S. dollar's dominance in international finance and trade means that Ethiopia will continue to be integrated into the U.S.-led global economic system. The future of U.S.-Ethiopia economic relations will depend in part on the trajectory of their political relationship. A thawing of relations and progress on human rights issues could pave the way for a re-evaluation of Ethiopia's AGOA eligibility. Conversely, continued tensions in Ethiopia's deepening ties with BRICS members could lead to a further decoupling of their economic ties. Humanitarian engagements and visa politics, a complex interplay. The U.S. has been a major provider of humanitarian assistance to Ethiopia for decades, and this role has become even more critical in recent years due to the Tigray conflict and recurring droughts. The U.S. government, through USAID and other agencies, has provided hundreds of millions of dollars in humanitarian aid to address the needs of those affected by conflict and displacement. This aid has been crucial in providing food, shelter, healthcare, and other essential services to vulnerable populations. However, the U.S. has also become more vocal in its criticism of human rights abuses in Ethiopia, including those committed by government forces and allied groups. This has led to a more conditional approach to aid delivery, with the U.S. demanding greater transparency, accountability, and access for humanitarian organizations. In some cases, the U.S. has suspended or redirected aid due to concerns about its diversion or misuse. Visa policies have also become a point of contention in U.S.-Ethiopia relations. The U.S. imposed visa restrictions on Ethiopian officials deemed responsible for human rights abuses during the Tigray conflict. These restrictions, while targeting specific individuals, have strained diplomatic relations and hampered high-level engagement between the two countries. At the same time, the U.S. has witnessed an increase in asylum applications from Ethiopian nationals fleeing conflict and persecution. The U.S. has granted temporary protected status to eligible Ethiopians, providing them with temporary legal status and work authorization. This reflects the complex humanitarian situation in Ethiopia and the U.S. role as a destination for those seeking refuge. The interplay of humanitarian assistance, human rights concerns, and visa policies will continue to shape the U.S.-Ethiopia relationship in the coming years. Finding the right balance between providing crucial aid, upholding human rights principles, and managing migration flows will be a delicate and ongoing challenge for policymakers in both countries.